Hello and welcome to our Blue Card webinar today. We would like to sincerely thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity for all of us to get together in our command community to discuss topics relevant to incident and fireground commanders. And today is intended to be a 1-hour discussion focusing on the critical fireground thinking and application of the strategic decision-making model. This is an overview of what is a 2-day workshop where these concepts are going to be discussed and explored in depth. The first offering of that workshop at the Alan V. Brunacini Command Training Center will be March 6th and 7th. There are still seats available for that. And if you would like to attend, you can go to bshifter.com to sign up for that. We are targeting around 45 minutes of information for you today, with about 15 minutes on the backside for questions and comments. If you have a question during the webinar, please enter it into the comment section. I'll be able to moderate those at the end of the presentation, and we are going to try to get to all questions. However, if we can't, we apologize ahead of time. We want to be respectful of everyone's time today, but we do understand that we may not be able to get at everybody's questions. So as the questions come in, please put them in the comments section, and we'll begin to get to them. First of all, we'd like to introduce our panelists today. Chris Stewart is here. Chris Stewart recently retired from the Phoenix Fire Department as Deputy Chief, and he continues to serve as a Deputy Chief at the Rio Verde Fire District in Arizona. Chris is also a Blue Card lead instructor and one of the principal presenters of the Blue Card Critical Thinking and Decision-Making Workshop that will be at the Alan V. Brunacini Command Training Center in March. Also with us today is Eric Phillips. Eric Phillips is a captain with the Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, and if you listen to the B Shifter podcast that I'm the host of, you'll hear Eric on there as Engine 4. So he's one of our rock star ICs out there getting it done in Las Vegas. And he's also a co-presenter with Chris for the 2-day workshop. And then also with us today is our program manager for Blue Card, Josh Bloom. Josh is a retired deputy chief from the Loveland Sims Fire Department and also operations chief at the Laughlin Fire Department. So welcome, panelists. We're looking forward to a great discussion today. I'll turn it over to Chris to get this kicked off.
Sounds great. Thanks, John. So we have an interesting conversation today and with you guys in trying to discuss some further things that I think really have been identified as elements to improve our customer service and improve the ability for our trainers and our departments to actually roll Blue Card out and utilize Blue Card more importantly on the incidents, because this is not a training system that was just built to train on. This is actually a system built to be used in at real fires on the fire ground, doing real work. So this was actually developed at the request of one of our departments, and we started to work on this. We recognized pretty quickly that we needed a couple different perspectives to actually be able to deliver this class in an effective way. So with Josh asking me to kind of take a hold of this and see what we could do with it, it became quickly obvious that we needed somebody who is regularly working at the company officer level, the initial IC has initial IC responsibilities regularly, right? And so Eric's the perfect candidate for this, right? As a company officer, we're working on a busy fire company that's actually going to the fires, that is implementing the Blue Card incident command system from the get-go on a very regular basis, and can speak to the challenges and the successes actually of being able to do that. Is having Eric participate with us and provide that perspective is really, really important. And as he likes to say, it's 50% on the initial arriving IC and 50% on IC number 2 to actually make this system work most effectively. And so we're going to present today, or talk about this discussion today with that, and he and I are going to kind of share in this discussion. Eric, you've got anything to add you want there on the front end?
No, I think that was it. I appreciate you asking me to be involved in this, and I look forward to sharing that love. 50% on IC number 1, 50% on IC number 2, and together that makes a good run scene. So it's important to have equal representation for both sides as we talk about decision making and the hazard zone.
Absolutely. And then, so before we jump into it, Josh, you want to offer any perspective on, kind of what you're thinking and the requests that we're getting from Blue Card departments and us being able to develop this and other things to better support our departments?
Yeah. So one thing about this class is we've been doing something along these lines for probably 3 or 4 years, and we didn't really call it this, but so many times we end up at an organization doing the safety class, the size up fire extinguishment tactics class, and we end up into these discussions about critical thinking, and then end up into a lot of sidebar conversations about like how does Blue Card connect to the Fireground? How does Blue Card line up, Chris, with something that you said, real work? We've had a lot of questions and interest from organizations that want us to come and help them understand better how they deploy, and really helping them connect all the dots. And I think that's part of what this class is. And then, the class that happened in Wilmington, the feedback from that, was pretty incredible from a fire department that's been using the Blue Card system for a long time, and kind of the light bulbs that came on, and that Blue Card is a system of the 8 functions of command, and using the strategic decision-making model and what all of that really means and how it ties together. So, out of this webinar today, obviously the intention is to get a bit of overview of the class. But with that said, we're offering this, in Phoenix in March, but as people listen to this class could easily be refined to fit, I think, the needs of whatever an organization may be looking for when it comes down to making decisions on the Fireground, managing a good incident, and how do we all help each other. And when I say help each other is, the task level connected to the tactical level, connected to the strategic level. And the best way we do that is that everybody understands all those components. So yeah, with that, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and Josh's point is the way this started, and I do want to give a shout out to the Wilmington Fire Department and Chief Burns and the training staff and all the operations folks there that we got a chance to talk to. They had some significant questions about application of Blue Card, and then connecting that to the work and improving their understanding on some of the details and some of the in between the lines type of stuff, if you will. And so we were able to go out and deliver that to all of their command officers, all their company officers, and all their move-up officers in two different 2-day sessions. So we were there for a total of 4 days. And then we were able to tailor that depending on the audience, right? And so move-up officers were obviously different than talking to the battalion chiefs and the command officers. And so we were able to adjust those discussion points, based on who we were talking to. And so in the future, I think it's really important. So any department or any region that's interested in having us come and do this, a critical component will be sitting down, having a conversation about what are the challenges inside your agency or inside your agencies or region, and how can we best assess and connect the all the other things actually that are going on in the American Fire Service, all the other conversations that we'll talk about here in a second, to actually having an effective command system and utilizing the Blue Card management system. So we'll get into this. I'll just say, as not, I don't know if it necessarily is a disclaimer, but it's a position, a perspective that I have is the Blue Card system, or the ICS system that Chief Bernasini developed in the late 1970s is the only system I ever worked in. I never, ever had to change or learn a new system or had anything presented to us other than the development and the maturity of that system in the Phoenix Fire Department. So I feel lucky. I feel as if it gave me, though, a pretty good foundation, and I certainly have plenty of operational experience exercising this in a myriad of ways, from super serious complex to the mundane, and understand the application. And I feel like my role here is to help with the application for a lot of departments in that. So what I'm learning is these challenges that agencies are having to make this a legitimate learning opportunity, and not only to, be able to say, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. But then to actually have the members and the folks that are responsible for doing it start to really understand it, start to execute it, and then starting to see the evaluation or the performance on the street, and see the improvement in performance and the improvement of understanding of when we do a good job, why we're doing a good job, and when we have problems or challenges or difficulties, why we had problems or challenges and difficulties. It's more about the why for us in many different ways, not just this class. So we'll get into this a little bit. So we're approaching this class in being able to reinforce what we know about the blue card system and why it's actually important, and then recognizing the challenges it is with regards to the implementation, the training, and then how we correct or progress or mature in the utilization of this system on the Fireground, right? Going to fires, using the system, and having the system help us rather than simply feel like it's getting in the way or it's making it harder for us. So what are the two things that firefighters hate? Is change in the way things are. So utilizing that standard is, we recognize when we come into a department, making this change or making this is difficult. And it's the change, number one, that's problematic, or it can be problematic, or feel like, why do we have to change? Things were just fine before. Well, likely they weren't, or an agency has found a better way to do things, and that's not a bad thing to do. Change just simply to change always relatively almost always sucks, but change for specific reasons is often important. And then the other part of the challenge we're seeing is that it makes folks uncomfortable having to be more responsible for things, especially as first in officers or IC number 2, feeling as if you're more responsible now as a first in IC or first in company officer for the evaluation of the situation, utilizing the functions of command, doing all the communication, setting up the incident, deploying our resources appropriately based on the critical factors and the conditions that are going on in the incident. That stuff, when you're used to arriving and just going to work and letting somebody else sort out where they're supposed to go, or utilizing some standard operating procedure or standard operating guideline to say where the second company goes, where the first truck company goes, where the third engine goes, that type of thing. That responsibility, that weighs on folks. We recognize that, and we need to teach and support that. And then there's a lot of knowledge that you need to improve to be good at utilizing the system. So that fundamental understanding at all levels of fire behavior, extinguishment, search, support work. Now you're applying it at the strategic level and saying, okay, based on what I'm finding out here, or what I'm seeing on the Fireground and what I think is critical up front, I need to put some work in place. I need to get these other companies working within a standardized incident action plan based on the conditions, based on our position in the risk management. That's hard for some folks who haven't had to think about that ever previously, whether they're new on the job or whether we're training old dogs to do new tricks, right? Within a command system. So we recognize that challenge. We hear the challenge coming to us from our agencies, and I'm sure the vast majority of the trainers have actually experienced these challenges firsthand, and then as trainers or people responsible for training departments or divisions, I should say. So those challenges are real, and this program is designed to kind of help departments work through those challenges. Eric, what do you want to throw in there?
Well, I think it's easy for us to tell people, hey, we need to make better decisions. That's easy to tell people, but have we really given them the tools on how to make better decisions? You might give them something, but have you really explained it and walked them through each of the components? At the end of it, you end up making a better decision. So I think in the fire service and part of this class is that we really break down those boxes, to be able to make better decisions. You're taking in information on a fire ground, fast. It's coming at you rapid fire. What's important? What's not? What do I need to address now? What can I address later? So it's something that I think all departments can improve on, and that's what we try to do in this class, is really give people the tools to be able to make decisions when they leave the class, to do something maybe different on the fire ground. I think one of the things that you really got to think about is the impact that our decisions make on the fire ground. We often think that we make one decision, it's just impacts maybe one section, but the decisions that we make on the fire ground impact from, unfortunately, death sometimes to seriously getting injured. But what's all the side effects from that? So I think when we look at decision making, there's a whole bunch of components that go into it, and we got to be able to give our folks some tools to be able to make those better decisions, not just tell them you need to make a better decision.
Yeah, and then the ability and the knowledge of how to exercise that once we're gone, and implementing that into the system so that it's sustainable, it's repeatable, and it's a normal part of their process. And so we're talking specifically about strategic decision making. How are we defining it? How are we discussing it? How are we talking about the relationship of all the components? And then how are we exercising it every time we do command training, right? From the company officer level to the command officer level. Heck, where I'm from, this was taught at the recruit level, because it's a common we want to develop a common operating language and a common critical thinking process on the Fireground. So it gets introduced to the recruits. Now, they're not responsible for it in the command system, but we want them thinking that way so that when they start becoming responsible, or they start having to communicate important stuff on the Fireground, that they've already been utilizing this process, from their infancy, I guess, if you will. So really what we're going to do with this class, or what we have been doing with this class, is we're going to reinforce the functions of command, and we're going to reinforce not only what they are, but why they exist, right? It's a linear process. It is designed to get us from the front through the middle to the end of an incident with the standardized command functions that we should be doing at every single incident we're responding to when we initiate the incident command system. So again, it's linear, so that it doesn't offer this a cyclical or critical thinking process in it. It offers steps and components that we need to do to be effective, definitely at the strategic level, right? So strategic decision making comes in is the cyclical critical thinking process that we utilize at the beginning of an incident, and then we utilize as the reevaluation tool as we do anything and everything, or as conditions change on the Fireground. So knowing and understanding the elements of strategic decision making, and then being able to define it, being able to help our members, the folks that you're expecting to do the work, and the folks you're expecting to be the ICs or division bosses or any other position on the Fireground, helping them understand what it is and then actually utilize it on real incidents. So if I get assigned Charlie Division, that when I show up there, I know what the expectations of my job are, and then I know how I'm going to critically think through that process as I get to Charlie Division, and I'm sizing it up and I'm reevaluating the risk management for what's going on back here, making sure that we are, based on the information I have, we're in the correct strategy, and then being able to say, all right, we need to do these things back here as a part of the Charlie Division to help the overall incident, right? So we're going to discuss and break that down in its smallest pieces, because we have to have a certain level of understanding in order to be able to start applying it. And then we're going to talk about and actually do in class, exercise that system through strategic decision-making sets and reps, is looking at the Fireground or photographs or videos or whatever elements we have, depending on the department, quite honestly, and the need of the agency, and going through strategic decision-making, and then help them understand how important that is as a training tool. We'll be better at the blue card system and utilize as incident commanders when we are better at understanding the utilization and the exercise of that process, of the strategic decision-making process, I guess, if we want to be more specifically. The other component that we're gonna throw in there is the accountability model, right? And so Chief Garrison was big with his accountability model that he utilized in Houston and the other places he worked, and I think that it has a way more important element to it. Because it's the accountability model for the organization, the entirety of an organization, or it should be, and it's the accountability model for all the individuals in that organization, right? So when what are the common things that we hear, when things aren't going the way we want them to do, either from a performance or an attitude or a training perspective, is, well, I didn't know that's what you wanted from me, or you never taught me how to do that, or nobody's ever told me I'm doing it wrong. Well, the accountability model is a critical component to being able to manage all of those. And then, as a more important system, when there's challenges to what's actually happening, the first and foremost element of that is the people that are responsible for the training and the management of these systems have to use the accountability model and go, okay, did we establish clear expectations? Did we train them on what they want to know? And are we clearly and effectively assessing performance to be able to manage to getting better, or manage that accountability part of it? Accountability is, we don't mean that in the sense of disciplinary accountability. We mean it in the accountability to each other and accountability to our performance and our customers, right? So we're going to talk about, in this class, we're going to talk about the functions of command and simply reinforce them and define them for what they are and how important they actually are. The system is built on that foundation. Then we're going to talk about strategic decision making. We're going to spend a bulk of the time actually having that discussion about that, and then discussing the accountability model and how we utilize that. Eric, what do you think?
I think you're spot on there, and I think that it's, again, how do we apply it into the field? What training tools do we take back to the station, back to your department, to train our folks to make those better decisions? It's easy to sit here and say it all, but we've got to figure out, how do we do that? So how do you do sets and reps in your stations? How do you talk about your fires? Do you review your fires? That accountability model, I think, is probably one of the most important things that anyone can do at any level within your organization, because you got to lay out those 4 steps. But how do you know if you don't ever monitor performance or even lay out the expectation? Everyone's doing their own thing. So everything that we're doing is laying that train track down the road, and everything that we're talking about keeps the train on those tracks. And that's what's awesome. But you got to have some kind of an accountability model to keep everybody on that track and accountable to the training. I think the worst thing we can do is spend all the time, money, and energy that people and departments put into training their folks and then let them do something else on the Fireground. Well, why would you take all the time and money and energy to do that if you have no accountability? And when you do something on a Fireground that we didn't talk about, it's okay. Well, that's not really what I think is expected by most departments. So learning these tools and really how to apply them within your organization, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. That's what keeps the train on the track as we talk about all these things. And the end result of all of this is we make better decisions. And that's the key to it. We have to make better decisions.
Yeah, and those better decisions are tied to performance, and the performance that we're expecting out of ourselves, and the performance that the community sees and feels based on the results of our action, right? So I'm tracking 100%. So go ahead, Josh.
Chris, just one thing. So, our group talks so much about accidental success, right? And sometimes I'm not sure that we even know globally what that really means. But we can't just look at the end result and measure success with that, right? It's every step along the way. So at the emergency incident, like, how did all of the little pieces go? Not just how the whole incident ended up. And we've had plenty of discussion in recent times of when things sometimes go sideways or we get the unexpected, we're usually only successful because people made critical decisions in that time. And oftentimes when we're not successful, they just went to, we're going to use more force and not make decisions, right? And I think that's another a takeaway, right? I mean, I don't remember exactly how Chief Lieb said it, but he said that about a couple of incidents, right? Like their people did not do what the policy said, but they did things and made critical decisions that had a huge impact on the event, and that's why they were successful. So that's what we want to come out of this. Make the right decisions and teach people how to make the right decisions and let them know that it's okay to make decisions. Just be able to justify those decisions that you made. And, it's not one size fits all. So I just wanted to, put that out there because that's a huge part of the class. I mean, we're going to have 2 full days of talking about that, of making decisions. This isn't a toaster on fire in the kitchen. It's not one room on fire, right? It's how are we successful all of the time, and how do we make the best decisions? How do we teach our people to do that? And everything you guys have talked about so far, and then the accountability model, how does that line up? And I think that answers a whole lot of those questions too. But the measurement of just how the event ended up is not measurement of success. Like, what did it look like throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the critical questions we're going to ask throughout this program is, how do we manage the fireground if we don't utilize the functions of command, right? Then how do we manage risk and safety if we don't have or don't utilize some form of critical thinking? And in this case, we're going to talk about strategic decision making, right? And then how do we manage fireground expectations if we don't have an accountability model? If if we're relying on luck to be our success, we ain't going to train on it or very well, right? I can't do that. So we've got to be able to identify when we do a good job, identify when we don't, and then utilize a system to be able to improve that. So all of this is moving towards effective work on the fireground, effectively meeting the tactical objectives, which is the customer service part of the fireground for us, right? And then the last part of it is a safety element. And in the safety element is we really, really are trying to improve our ability not to fall victim to the NIOSH top 5, right? In our fireground management. So when we start talking about the NIOSH top 5, so the top 5 contributing factors for deaths and injuries on the fireground, these are irrefutable, right? All you have to do, pick 5 line of duty deaths. You're going to find all 5 of these in that sample, right? And so we need to be able to connect the blue card system, the incident command system, strategic decision making, how we train to and improve the understanding of what these top 5 things are actually saying and what the expectation is moving forward. So when we talk about improper risk assessment, there's a lot of things that go into that. And our system and utilizing strategic decision making has a clear component of risk management, and actually evaluating that risk management based on the conditions and based on the expectation and the outcomes we want to have on the end. And if we don't effectively understand what's going on the fireground, we are going to highly likely put ourselves in a really poor position with regards to our risk management. And so we need to not only understand fire behavior and flow path and all those other things about the fireground, building construction, time, all those elements that compound to make this harder, but then we need to be able to figure out, how the heck do we size up? Are we defining how we size up, where we start, what questions are common for all of us, or where should we be beginning on our size up? Because in my experience, teaching tactics and strategy in the college system in the Phoenix area, I'd have 100 students in the class. And at the beginning of the semester, we'd always ask the question, everybody know what size up is? And everybody nods their head. Yes, I know exactly what size up is. Okay. And then I start sampling people, define it for me and tell me how you do it. And then I get however many different people I ask, I get that same number of different answers. They're kind of close, but not always close. And everybody feels like they're starting or looking at it from a different perspective. So we need to identify very clearly, where are we beginning our size up, and how, and it has to be tied to the tactical objectives. And what that does, then it helps us clearly define what is critical on the fireground. If we are successful at that, we likely have we have the right foundation to be successful at our critical thinking process and successful using strategic decision making. We also have a significant opportunity to be successful at improving improper risk assessment on the fireground and not operating in defensive or during defensive conditions in offensive positions. And so that's a significant focus, and that's one of the drivers of this class. The lack of an incident command system, when we have a lack of incident command, it's because we didn't understand how important or effective incident command can actually be to do real work on the fireground. It's not the incident command system isn't the solution. The incident command system is a pathway and the resource to get to the solution, and to do it the same way, repeatable, consistently, and be able to measure performance on the back end. Right. And that's the way the boss developed it, because the boss expected us in the Phoenix Fire Department to do real work. We didn't hide under the truck when things got dangerous. So that there was an expectation that we were able to do that. So the incident command system helps us do that. A lack of accountability. If we build a system where the IC manages the not only assigning the position and function based on the conditions, based on the risk management, based on the strategy, that helps the work, but then it helps the accountability part. If there's a problem, I know based on the system and the assignments where everybody was supposed to be working and what they were supposed to do. And I don't care whether it's 3 companies or it's 30 companies. The incident commander should have that ability. So as one of my old bosses in the Phoenix system would say, it's the way you connect the nozzle person on engine 1 with the IC, whether you've got 5 firefighters or 50 firefighters working on the fireground. Then inadequate communications. Communications is about how we communicate and the language we use and what we communicate, and in the right time. We tend to over communicate on the fireground, and sharing information that is merely interesting to the outcome of the situation, right? We're not necessarily communicating it. We're just narrating it, or we're making ourselves feel better by talking on the fireground. And that's ICs down. Right? That's everybody on the fireground. So this system is built, and we talk about it utilizing strategic decision making and utilizing our standard communication process in the Blue Card system of how to do that. And then the last thing, failure to follow established SOPs or training. If our SOPs and our SOPs are highly effective, and if we train to them very specifically, and believe me, if you can't train to them, there's a problem with your SOPs. And making sure that they're effective, making sure that we can train to them, we are much more highly likely to utilize them efficiently and properly on the fireground. And so that's why we want to spend time in this system actually helping organizations figure it out so that they can train their members better. And so when we tie what we're talking about with strategic decision making, our ultimate goal is to improve those NIOSH 5. I don't want us falling victim to any one of those or writing a report about any of us because we did or we didn't effectively do those things. Because when you know, you can't unknow. Eric, what do you think?
Well, I think that NIOSH top 5, and we could talk about that for 2 days. Or more, very easy. But I think it's, I just ask everybody out there in webinar land, what is your department doing right now to address each of those top 5? How are you training your members today on each of those subjects there? I think it's easy. We all know and we all can repeat what the NIOSH top 5 in, but can you break down each of one similar to what Chris just did and ask your officers? And when I say officers, I mean battalion chiefs and lieutenants or captains, however your organization is. But really, how do you get better at risk improvement? How do you make a better risk assessment? Communication's an easy one to pick on. How long has communication been a problem within your organization? We can ask the guy with the most seniority, gentleman in class today, 38 years. Ask him, how long has communication been a problem? 38 years. Well, are we going to get serious about fixing it? So once we identify within the organization what the real problem is, are we ready to fix it? And that's what I think is cool about this class is we dive into some of those subjects and really get to the root of the problem, and then help departments figure it out. This is how we need to address this situation to make it better. So you don't fall fall into one of these top 5 NOS reports, because we don't want that to happen. If we address this top 5, we make better decisions.
So in the application or the training or the ongoing process of utilizing this incident command system, I cannot imagine there has not been a department out there that hasn't heard feedback, if you will. I'll use that politely, based on centered around safety. Why are we so preoccupied with safety? And then why are we so preoccupied with communication and effective communication? Well, the safety thing is, simply put, is that's how we put ourselves in a position to be successful and do it over and over again, right? We need to be able to come back to the next incident and be ready for the next incident, right? So I hope I'm not the only one, and I feel very confident I'm not, that I've heard things like, why are we so preoccupied with safety? Or we can't save anybody if we're so preoccupied with our own welfare or our own safety, right? It's not. It's one or the other. We're either gonna be kick-ass firemen, or we're gonna be safe. You can't do both. Well, I think it's all nonsense, right? And it's really incumbent on us as the educators, the teachers, and then the folks who are managing the work on the actual Fireground to change that perspective, if you will, right? So does safety matter? Duh. Yes, it 100% does. Well, why does it matter, right? Well, because we have a 0% acceptable loss on the Fireground. We'll talk about what that actually means. We don't show up going, whoo, man, this looks like a bad one. I'm going to be okay losing a couple today. That's not the way it works, right? And if it does, then we need to have other conversations, right? That's a way bigger problem. And then if you go back and you look in the command safety book, in Bruno's command safety book that was published in 2004, right after Brett Tarver died at the Southwest Supermarket, and I go through it regularly, especially the upfront stuff, the very first chapter, right? And there's 2 parts in there, especially when the boss is talking about command safety. There's a performance mentality. And that's the outside promise that we have as firefighters and organizations to our customers, right? And there's the safety and survival mentality. That's the inside promise we have to each other, right? And so that outside promise, that performance mentality means we're confident, easy for me to say, confident, competent, like we know what the heck we're supposed to be doing, and that we're willing to place our body between the hazard and our customers, right? But the critical element to that is we can't protect Mrs. Smith if we can't protect ourselves. The other part of that is that safety and survival mentality. We've got to care about our firefighters. We have to give a shit about their welfare, both in the firehouse and in their occupation, as well as on the Fireground, right? And as ICs, we've got to be willing to place ourselves between our firefighters and the hazard when the time comes. We recognize that the conditions do not match the actions, and we are in a bad situation, or we are in an offensive position with defensive conditions, that we're going to stop it. We're going to correct it, and we're going to do something better or smarter, right? And as the boss would say, we're going to quit doing the wrong thing harder, right? So, and we make sure that we have that instinct to protect one another. If we can't protect ourselves, we cannot protect Mrs. Smith. It is not it's not a repeatable process if we're constantly screwing ourselves up on the Fireground. The other part is with communication, right? We regularly hear, why are we talking so much at the beginning of these incidents? If I could just get to work, things will get better, right? Or why do we have to tell command everything that we're doing? Well, you don't, right? But there's a few things that the IC needs to know. So we need to work on Fireground communication, and kind of like Eric said, man, when are we going to get serious about really managing Fireground communication and what we're talking about, and making sure that it's connected to the work, and keeping people in the right place doing the right thing to make the incident better. In the end, it's about Mrs. Smith, and it is about the customer, right? So we're going to specifically address safety. We're going to specifically address communication by utilizing the system better and more appropriately. And that's a really big deal. We can have frank conversations about that. Eric, do you have anything you want to throw on that?
I think that safety thing always comes up. This act's probably one of the best parts of the class when we start hearing these notions that people want to throw out there about safety. We can't do this because we're going to be too safe and all those things. And you know what? It really comes back to those critical fireground factors. What are they? When we give somebody assignment, it's task, location, and objective. And on the fireground, sometimes we don't get to always achieve that objective. And it's not because we don't want to. It's not because we don't have kick-ass firefighters that are trained and are aggressive and want to get in there and do the objective. But sometimes that building and those critical factors just don't allow us to do it. And as officers we have to recognize that. And we have to make that decision when those critical factors don't allow us to do something. We have to be able to be safe and recognize that and change what we're doing and communicate that over the radio. So this is a good part of that class where you get to have some of those comments said and then have like you said, a frank discussion about it. Let's be real. Let's talk about it. And I think what we identified is that, the fire service has a hard time really identifying those critical factors. It's easy to talk about, but can you look at a picture? Can you look at a building? Can you see it on scene and then digest that information and then do something different when things aren't going right?
So one of the reasons I think Josh asked Eric and I to do this is because we pretty much, for the both of us, have worn out all of our feelings, right? And so we can have conversations, and we can have the hard ones. And I'm good with it. Eric's totally good with it. Is challenge the plan. You want to call bullshit on something? Call bullshit on something. Let's actually talk about it. And we don't have to hate each other at the end, quite honestly, right? But we're going to stand our ground on what we know and what we know to be right. And we are not here to dismantle people's thinking. We're here to refine their thinking. I want them to be good. I want them to, when they show up, that they can kick ass. They have permission to kick ass, but it's going to be within a system, and it's going to be with an incident commander that always has the right to say, stop, we're doing something different. And so that's an important part of it. And I liked that the most, and especially the challenge part of it, of the questions and the WTF moments about why are we doing this? So that's a good thing. The last thing before we get to the questions and answers I want to go through is there's a lot of information and a lot of research and a lot of opinions out there in the American Fire Service, right? I don't think there's actually ever been more, right? Because social media, the internet, all of that amplifies those positions. And I don't necessarily take many of those positions to be very, very bad. I think they all have a position and they all have a place in this. However, we need to refine some of that information so that we can effectively use that. So right now, the information that's out there about fire extinguishment has never, ever been better. Between FSRI and the NIST prior to that, and even stuff that the ATF has done, there's never been more information about fire behavior. And FSRI's job, and they'll state it very clearly, and I know because I work in and around those guys, is we're not here to tell the fire service what to do. We're here to tell you what's going on and to better explain your situation. You got to figure out what you're going to do about it. You're the experts in the action. So we've got to figure that out. We got to know what to do that and how important that is and when and how we prioritize work on the fireground. So there is no bigger conversation than when and how we prioritize fire extinguishment and search and rescue. We say that our primary existence, our critical mission point is to save lives. I could not agree more. We need to get and have hard discussions about what the most effective thing to do is, given certain situations, given the critical factors about given the strategy on what we actually need to do right then and there to make things better for life safety. So it's not blindly, going in and doing any one thing and concentrating on that one thing. It's making good decisions about what's going on the Fireground and when and how to actually apply the right work at the right time. And that goes for support work too, right? I'm a West Coaster, so vertical ventilation, that's a hot button topic, right? And ventilation is ventilation. I'm not married to the way we do it. It needs to be done right. It needs to be done in the right place. And the person that leads that is the IC, should be the IC, and based on real information and real knowledge. So how do we take what we know in the fire service today? How are we implementing what is being presented on the firefighter rescue survey? How are we implementing what's being communicated on Project Mayday? Taking experiential data like those two prominent things and applying them to our actions and our incident command system, and then taking the more scientific stuff that FSRI and the other research based folks are doing, and I'll even give a shout out to the National Fire Sprinkler Association, right, for the research they're doing right now with fire sprinklers in big box buildings that are completely and totally changing our perspective of and prioritization of action in big box buildings. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on. We need to better apply it, take some of the emotion out of it, and you put it into a system that's tried and true so that we can get better at it. So that allows us to have some real conversations, some legitimate conversations. And I'm not saying we're coming in there with all the answers. I know that we're not coming in there with all the answers, but we do have a pretty good perspective. We have a fantastic incident command system. We have experience at the application of that system and the experience of training people to do that, utilize that system at real fires. I feel very confident that we go in there, we can at least move the needle in a measurable way for organizations to improve how they're doing on the Fireground. JV, I'm 3 minutes over.
Well, that's okay. It was a good discussion, and we do have a few questions to get to. So we'll start to get to those right now. Ryan Bond, excuse me, has a question. Can you speak to how this applies to mid-sized and smaller organizations? I assume you implement the strategic decisions based on your deployment model, and I probably answered that there. Resources outweigh the hazard, and the hazard outweighs resources, helps that initial IC make that determination. But I think it's an important thing for this panel to talk about, because once in a while we get thrown back at us, well, this worked for Phoenix, how is it going to work for my department? Or it works for Las Vegas, how does this work for my fire department? So you guys want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's a legitimate question. So fire burns the same on the East Coast, West Coast, North and South. It burns the same if you're a 1 department station or a 300 department station. The fire reacts the same all over. So as far as making decisions and applying the strategic decision-making model, you look at the functions of command. Function number 1 is deployment. So all of our decisions have to be based off that function 1, which is deployment. If you only respond with 1 engine with 2 people, and you might get 10 within 20 minutes of the incident, your decisions have to be based on your deployment and be able to do it safe. If you show up with 30 people within 6 minutes of the incident, yeah, you're going to be able to get a little bit more work done in a safer manner, but the decision's still the same based on that deployment. So I think when you kind of the first question you asked there is, how do we manage the Fireground with the functions of command? It's right there. You got to start with number 1 is deployment. So I think it applies equally to any size over the organization for some of those facts. Fire burns the same everywhere. It doesn't discriminate on any factor. So I think it would be awesome for big departments and small departments. I don't see any difference.
As my old boss would say, you've got to build tactics based on what you've got, right? and if you have a small number of firefighters initially, your tactics better match the most effective tactics for a small number of firefighters, getting the absolute best done that you can. And the system allows for that. It's not just for, an overwhelming resource response.
All right. Next question we have from David Lopez. Can we explain again the difference between strategic Mayday and task or tactical level Mayday? And can the help order be applied to both?
Yeah, I can take that one on. So if we're going to define what a strategic level Mayday is, a strategic level Mayday is a Mayday that happened because at the strategic level there was not effective size up or recognition of the conditions and the critical factors, and we were likely or are operating in a position that does not match those conditions. So the prime example is operating in offensive positions when you have defensive conditions from any perspective, but most importantly from the IC's perspective, right? So that who's in control of that? The IC is in control of that. If they're allowing that to occur on the fireground and we ultimately end up with a Mayday on the fireground, that is 100% on the strategic level. They could have fixed that. And so in the end, right, if we're going to look at true accountability, then the strategic level is responsible for not allowing that to happen or diminishing the opportunity for that to happen. And then if they recognize it's going on, remove people before that actually occurs. So that's kind of the definition of strategic. If we want to talk about task or tactical level Maydays, those are decisions made. We'll talk about task level. That's a decision that is made at the firefighter and company level that or can be a decision that's made at the firefighter and company level that puts them in a position to end up calling a Mayday. So one of the best conversation pieces around that is air management, right? If we're ineffective at the task level and the company officer level at managing air in the hazard zone, it puts us in a tremendous position to have Maydays, right? So the prevention for that is effective in a training. Use the accountability model. Effective standards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, effective standards, effective training, and monitor how we actually do it on the fireground to improve or diminish the opportunity for that task level Mayday to happen. Now, when we talk about tactical level, since if we're talking about tactical level officers, if we're talking about division bosses, well, those look more like strategic level Maydays or strategic level problems. If we don't recognize the critical factors, we're not in the right position or risk management as a tactical level boss, as a division boss, then that puts us in a position. So we're trying to eliminate that. If we're talking about company officers managing their crews, then it looks more like the air management issue or the depth issue or getting off hose lines or engaging, attempting to do search and rescue in positions and places and conditions where it's not reasonable to do search and rescue. So that's kind of the delineation of those. The help order has everything to do with starting with the individual who's having the Mayday, right? Unless that person's unconscious, I don't know of a person on this planet that if they're involved in a Mayday aren't going to try and fix their problem themselves, right? And so they're going to start working on that. The next level is the people that were assigned and working with that person, and then the other companies on the interior, and then the last component of help order is the companies that are coming from the exterior, or the RIC or RIT or whatever letters we want to assign to those exterior companies that should be tactical reserve in on deck positions in the divisions. That's the last step in that help order. So if we're talking about Maydays and prevention, all this stuff we've been rattling on about beforehand actually works to prevent the opportunity for those Maydays. And then if we're going to talk about the response side and the help, we can dig into the the Project Mayday data. That I can certainly talk about the Phoenix Fire Department data from Southwest Supermarket and compare it to like other similar studies that I think it was Asheville, North Carolina did, and how closely they actually went up to what we're actually finding from 21,000 real Maydays that, God rest his soul, Don Abbott had been working on prior to his death.
Anything else from the panel on that?
No, well said. I think the strategic made, hopefully we recognize that and make a decision early just to do a strategic shift before we actually end up having a Mayday with the crews on the inside. So hopefully some better decision making eliminate some of that operating the wrong strategy through all that.
All right, let's try to get a couple more questions here. Tyler Jack, good morning from South Lake Tahoe. Hey, South Lake Tahoe. I was asked a question from one of my guys recently regarding rescue. The question was, if we came across the need for an immediate rescue while performing our 360, do we switch to rescue mode on the 360 follow-up report? The way I look at it, rescue is simply a standard action attached to a standard condition, the standard condition being offensive. Your thoughts?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Josh.
I'll get that. So, I mean, we just did a podcast recently with it was Cobb County again, right? And they realized they do a size up, and then they realize there's a victim that was in a window, and they managed that event like it was anything else on the Fireground, and kept 100% kept emotion out of it. Gave a standard assignment to a company to do VES, gave them some pretty defined orders of where they were going to operate, what they were going to do, and assigned another company to stretch a hand line to put the fire out. And we can't change gears and try to use a different system or act like it's something different. We have to continue to use what we use all the time and what we're comfortable with. So we're not going into a different place. It's a critical factor. The victim is a critical factor. And when we roll out the door, one of the things that we talk a lot about is if it's got beds in it, we should plan on there's going to be victims. And what does that really look like? And that comes back to another one of those critical thinking pieces that through this class, there'll be plenty of discussion on that too. Like that should not catch us off guard, and we should be ready to deploy and address that problem. We should be ready to support the operation following, that problem with, and I'm going to throw Cobb County out there again because it blew me away the first time I heard it. And it's like, holy shit, they're dialed. The incident commander telling the medic unit, make sure you bring your cyano kit for this patient to the alpha side. And it's like, that didn't happen by accident. It happened because they've trained people and they've discussed what does this look like when we actually go to these events. So it doesn't change anything except for the incident action plan.
Very good. All right, let's take one more question. This is an easy one. Is there a platform for instructors to share pull raw audio to demonstrate these concepts and actions to our people? Well, we do have a podcast. The B-Shifter podcast is on all the platforms. And about once a month, we try to feature some audio on there, either of strategic shifts, rescues, good initial radio reports. And then we are also looking to get all that information from you as well. So if you have a great piece of radio traffic or a video that you would like to share with us, our emails have been up here. You can share them with Josh or myself, and we would like to share it with everybody else. But we do try to share those, and much more in 2024. We will be doing that. So you'll stay tuned. We're going to do that more. But right now, we're just getting that on the B-Shifter podcast, both available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And let's see here. Pete Webb has a question. Will this class be done in regions on the road or just the CTC? Josh?
Yeah, so we are going to offer, this class started on the road. So we are going to offer it on the road. The Phoenix class, again, is in March. And then if you're interested in hosting one of these classes, you can reach out to me, Josh at bshifter.com, and we can talk about it. We're actually Chris and Eric are coming back here to Cincinnati. Actually, Eric's here right now. His family keeps saying that he has a second family here. But these guys have been spending a lot of time on the road all over as we continue to develop and grow the program. But we're doing a class in January in our region that's a kind of a modified version of this over 2 days. And So the answer is yes. It will be offered like any other workshop we do on the road. If you want to reach out to me, we can discuss what that looks like.
All right.
Hey, John, can I say something on that?
Absolutely.
I think if anybody wants to reach out to Chief Donald Burns at the Wilmington Fire Department, I think the value for him and the value that we saw was being able to actually connect with all the officers in his department and be able to have real conversations about their organization, their expectations, and we were able to set it all up ahead of time so that we could go in there and deliver the most for them. So if you have any questions, and you don't have to believe us, as I know Chief Burns will give you the good, bad, and the ugly of what it was like having us there.
All right. Well, if you are interested in going to this class at the Alan V. Bernasini Command Training Center and you haven't been there yet, we'd like to invite you. You can go to bshifter.com to sign up for it. There are some seats available, so I'm sure after we introed it and let you know what it is, those seats will probably go fast. But monitor bshifter.com, as we'll be able to keep you updated on other classes that get added as the year goes on. Any other final thoughts from any of the panel?
Oh, appreciate us having us, JB. You do an awesome job as always. And we look forward to taking this out there and having people do some critical thinking and make better decisions as they move along on the Fireground, and better yet, have a better understanding of the system and how to apply it to the real work that we do out on the Fireground. So thanks, guys.
I can't wait to talk about it more. I'm looking forward to the Phoenix delivery, and anybody who wants to bring us out there, then we look forward to being able to do the best we can to help you.
Thank you all. Thanks everybody for getting on. What do we end up with, John? 300 and some people on here?
Yeah, eventually we were. People now that lunch is over, they're going to lunch, have been dropping off. So we'll get people out to lunch, but we told you it was going to be an hour. But on behalf of everyone at Blue Card and B Shifter, we want to thank all of you, because you give us our mission. You are here to connect with us in this command community. So we appreciate your time today. If you need more information, you can hit up any of us, and just stay tuned for more information, as we'll be throwing it out as we get there. So until next time, thanks so much for being here on the webinar today, and we'll see you all soon.